She's a best-selling novelist, poet, and essayist living in Berkeley, California. Her newest novel, Electric City, one of the best books of 2014 by National Public Radio. Her autobiographical poetry collection, Gravity, was highly praised. And her first novel, The Speed of Light, was translated into 9 languages and won several literary prizes in both the US and Europe. Blue Nude, her second novel, was named among the best books of 2006 by the San Francisco Chronicle. Today, a Shades contributor, Miss Elizabeth Rosner, will be reading Hello, Catastrophe.
My darkest blues started 15 years ago. I was on a plane heading east from California to New York, toward what would turn out to be my mother's death. I didn't know that at the time, only that she had been rushed into surgery with such urgency that I had to drop everything and fly. The last time I'd seen her, just 3 weeks earlier, she was lying in a hospital bed while receiving a transfusion. Her oncologist assured me she had at least 3 months to live. Worst case scenario, he said. But my mother whispered to me when I kissed her cheek, "I'll never see you again." I kept telling myself she was the kind of person who said those things. When I finally landed at the Albany airport, my father and siblings were all there. For a delirious moment, I allowed myself to believe that everything was all right, that this was why they had all come to meet me. But the second I looked at my father's face, I knew she was gone. My legs gave way, and I fell onto the grimy airport carpet where I stayed, sobbing. Passengers steered around me, and I didn't care for a second what they thought or imagined. Grief was in charge now. Until that moment, the year had promised to be one of the best of my life. I'd signed a publishing contract for my first novel, along with an advance to write my second novel. When the tears came so relentlessly that I developed eye infections, I went to see my doctor, who asked if I might consider trying Prozac. My mother died, I wept. I'm very sad. Aren't I supposed to be sad? A week after my first novel was published, on the first day of my multi-city book tour, terrorists flew 2 jetliners into the World Trade Center. More falling, much more falling down. I had to disregard my own tremendous sadness in the face of the larger, much larger tragedy of 9/11. As a daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, this kind of deference to other tragedies was second nature to me. 18 months passed. My first novel came out in paperback with a new cover promising a new life, and I fell in love. Here's where the story starts to sound happy, right? I met the man of my dreams, handsome, brilliant, talented, passionate. If only my mother could have met him, I thought. She would have been ecstatic. She would have said things like, "You two would make such gorgeous babies." But we did not have babies. That perfectly amazing love of my life actually told me on day 1 that his lifelong approach to relationships was, "I cheat and I leave." He spoke those shocking words out loud. I heard them. It was possibly the one and only time he told the truth. Some part of me could have chosen to cut and run in the opposite direction. Certainly a woman paying a different kind of attention would have done that. Unfortunately, I wasn't that woman. In an almost but not quite secret recess of my mind was the haunted awareness that I was living in the best of times and the worst of times. The stealthy infidelity he had perfected with his previous wives, girlfriends, lovers was, of course, happening to me too. I just couldn't name it yet. Desperately ignoring my terrors, I completed and published a second novel. We took trips to France, Italy, Kenya. We argued about boundaries and rules and agreements and compromises. It was a form of torture, daily, hourly. Can I blame any of this on persistent grief over my mother's death? Hard to say. I maintained a fatalistic conviction that this man and I were destined to be together, that life without him could never be better than life with him. And then I got cancer. The diagnosis came on the morning of my 49th birthday. The fact that breast cancer killed my mother and two of my dear friends was not lost on me, yet somehow I accepted the diagnosis with a surprising degree of equanimity. This calm was a variation on a perpetual awareness that terrible things were always happening and always about to happen. Moments of happiness merely existed in order to seduce you into dropping your guard. What you really needed to do was practice hypervigilance at all times, bracing yourself for the next cataclysm, which was one small step around the corner, one breath from now. My diagnosis was invasive cancer, requiring 2 surgeries, chemotherapy, and radiation. "Hello, catastrophe," a voice whispered with something like satisfaction. "I knew you were around here somewhere." For a very long time, I could not find a way to forgive myself for loving an insecure, cowardly, broken person who was ruthless enough to cheat on his so-called partner while she was going through treatment for breast cancer. It wasn't him I couldn't forgive, though it's pretty obvious that I haven't quite forgiven him. It remains an item on my spiritual to-do list. It was me I couldn't forgive, the woman who had given herself cancer. I'd finally thrown him out, but on the worst days, I could not eat or get out of bed. I thought cancer was the worst thing that could happen to me, but it turned out there was something even worse. The mild nausea from chemo was nothing compared to the soul-shaking nausea I felt now. I hated him for treating me like garbage, and I hated myself more than anything. I hated that I hadn't been smart enough or brave enough or strong enough to say no thanks back on that very first day when he said, "I cheat and I leave." I also hate revisiting the story, as if I've moved so far beyond it that I don't feel those feelings anymore, as if I can share with you my lessons and growth and recovery. That's only true to a degree. I have moved beyond it in time and space. I have been recovering, as in a work in progress, a path I am walking. How the deep, dark, almost black and blue blues faded? It began with a dog. A rescue, as in she rescued me. Her ridiculous cuteness tugged at my frozen heart, brought back my smile, my giggle. There were glorious, devoted friends who stood by me no matter what, even when I talked the crazy talk of maybe taking him back. I found my ability to travel alone to the kinds of gorgeous places I once romanticized about. I found my way back to writing and eventually to completing and publishing my 3rd novel. I even found a wide-hearted, deep-souled man who showed me for a brief but oh so significant interlude that my heart wasn't dead, my body wasn't either, and I could maybe trust someone again. I could let my body be seen with its scars, not to mention the messiest ones on the inside. I didn't take any antidepressive drugs. I never wanted to. Instead, I swam and meditated and walked with my dog. Little by little, I discovered it was possible to fall back in love with the world. I could wake up grateful to be alive and not in pain, grateful for my annual all-clear MRI reports, grateful for the sweet black dog and the gorgeous oak trees, and the fragrance of roses, and the suggestion of rain. Today, the color of my blue is paler and sweeter than before, much more beautiful than frightening. I call it the color of sea foam. It helps me stay afloat. Thank you.